available. And the way to access that is to look at the bottom of your screen and to click on the CC, and that should activate your subtitles. And so we are going to begin with a digital libation from artist Viktor L.
So we'll go
if
myths.
they go out of space, they will live alive. But if they stay there,
I do not come to you as reality. I come to you as myth. Because that's what black people are. Myths.
When we was children, we really believed you could work the good out of evil. We believe in the newsprint on the wall, your tree of glass jars and bottles, the rice you carry in your pockets. We believe in the frizzle-head chicken, the coins, the roots, and the flowers. We believe they will protect us. And wherever lead in, we honor love. I ain't been scared of nothing. And no one. Because I knew my great-grandmother have it all in her pocket. Or could walk it up. Never forget who we is and how far we done come. I believe here. I don't have no other choice.
Eli, there's a thought, a recollection, something somebody remembers. We carry these memories inside of we. Do you believe that those hundreds of Africans from here on this other side will forget everything they once knew? We don't know where the recollection comes from. Sometimes we dream of, but we carry these memories inside of we.
Now the iron was back. The face, softened by hair, made him trust her enough to step inside her door, smack into a pool of pulsing red light. She was right. She was right. Walking through a wave of grief so strange and a long way to a long sight around the
And now I'm gonna turn it over to Ariel.
Good afternoon, good noon, good morning, wherever you might be. Welcome. My name is Ariel Julia Brown. I am the founder and director of Black Spatial Relics. Welcome to the 2021 Black Spatial Relics convening in this, our closing moment, our closing ceremony, our closing keynote from Germaine Ingram. Black Spatial Relics is a space that amplifies the importance of Black radical performance traditions in relation to land, site, and place through the championing of works about and in conversation with slavery, justice, and freedom. Over the last 5 years, we have offered residencies, micro grants, programmings, and convenings to gather Black artists and amplify their work that is undoubtedly moving us toward our collective freedom. This convening works with Philadelphia as a site of multi-century Black diasporic exchange and power building, As Black Spatial Relics expands to offer residencies to Black radical performance makers in the Caribbean this year, we wanted to take the space to consider this multi-century dialectic between Philadelphia and the Caribbean at this convening. In thanks and celebration and collaboration with Viktor Lee's tremendous digital libation that we just witnessed, that we'll get to witness again upon our final closing, entitled, "In the End, It Will All Change the Same." I want to invite us to 3 collective breaths in gratitude for the Black folks who make this space and all other spaces of Black dreaming and organizing possible, on all sides of time, on all sides of the veil, on all sides of land and water. Thank you. And as we are now gathered more fully, I want to thank our media partners in this convening. I want to thank the U.S. Department of Arts and Culture for their amplification of this work. I want to thank HowlRound for streaming and archiving this convening. I want to thank our partners at the Center for Experimental Ethnography for their thought partnership and amplification. I want to thank our fiscal sponsor at Notch Theater Company for making so much of this possible. I want to thank Added Velocity, which is administered by Temple Contemporary at Tyler School of Art and Architecture at Temple University and funded by the William Penn Foundation for their support of this convening. And I want to thank our team, Joe Tolbert Jr., our convening producer, Malkio Ketch, our associate producer, Shreya Shah, tech support, Malek Yalawi, live captioning, Cecily Morales, graphic work, for their work to make this convening possible. It would not be possible without these folks. We want to ask that if you're sharing this work on social media, and we hope that you do, that you use the hashtags #BSR5, FIVE, and hashtag Black Spatial Relics in your posts. And if you are watching on Facebook, we want you to know that we are collecting questions and comments from that platform as well for Germaine. I have the distinct privilege and honor of being able to introduce our closing keynote, Germaine Ingram. Germaine has dedicated a half century to work in law, public service, performing arts, and arts cultural strategy and production. She spent 30 years from 71 to 2001 in a legal career that included 5 full-time faculty positions at Temple and the University of Pennsylvania Law Schools. Litigation practices involved representation of plaintiffs in civil rights cases, complex class actions, and catastrophic injury cases. As general counsel and deputy to the superintendent of the Philadelphia School District, where she led multi-pronged litigation for equitable and adequate school funding, and had a key role in applying an equity lens to all aspects of the district's delivery of public education to a diverse population of 220,000 students. She served as a vice president of the Children's Defense Fund in Washington, D.C., and in leadership and consulting positions in Philadelphia-based nonprofit organizations serving low-income families, children, and youth. Her career in arts and culture spanning more than 25 years includes dance and vocal performance, choreography, oral history, writing, filmmaking, and arts and culture strategy at the intersection of art and social change. She creates evening-length multidisciplinary works that explore themes related to history, collective memory, and social justice, and designs, directs, and executes for herself and other artists, arts and culture projects that illuminate community, arts, and cultural history. Recent and ongoing projects include, sorry, I lost myself. Recent and ongoing projects include an exploration of the history and evolution of performance expressions of Yoruba-rooted ritual in Philadelphia since the mid-20th century, and a performance archival project honoring the environments of collective genius in North Philadelphia that galvanized the careers of world-class jazz innovators in the 1950s to the 1970s. Her work has been supported by the NEA, the Pew Center for Arts and Culture, the Independence Foundation, the Leeway Foundation, Lomax Family Foundation, and Wincote Foundation, the Philadelphia Council on the Arts and Humanities, among others. And among other awards, she was a 2010 Pew Fellow in the Arts and Leeway Foundation Transformation Awardee. She received her BA in Political Science from Syracuse University and her JD from the University of Pennsylvania. She was a fellow in Law and Humanities at Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And as a lawyer, she represented clients in cases in the Pennsylvania Common Pleas, Commonwealth, Superior, and Supreme Courts, and the federal court system in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, and the United States Supreme Court. Please join me in welcoming Germaine Ingram from North Philly.
First, I want to acknowledge that I'm in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on the land of the Lenape Indians. I'll give you a visual description. I'm a Black woman of medium brown complexion. I'm wearing an orange sweater with lemon yellow streaks horizontally. And I'm wearing a head wrap with small stripes of green and orange. And I'm also wearing a lime green scarf and some drop sparkly earrings. Behind me is, you can see, part of a floor to ceiling hand painted triptych that shows a skyscape with blue sky and clouds and some hints of orange that suggest a sunset. So thank you, Ariel, and thank you, Black Spatial Relics, for the deep and attentive work that you do to lift up and amplify the work of artists who work from the well of Black thought, Black speech, Black temporality, Black memory, Black spatiality, and Black magic. I have been moved day after day by the artists who have shared their practice during this convening. I've been moved by the ways that BSR encourages and supports self-reflection, risk-taking, rigor, and pursuit of care for self and others. I hope that this closing keynote can do justice to BSR's impact and vision. I come at this with high excitement about BSR extending residencies to artists from the Caribbean. I want to talk from the perspective of my own performance and curatorial practice about why making that connection feels so potent. It's not simply a matter of expanding the geographical reach of the residencies. It, to my mind, has to do with how this initiative speaks from the very practice of diaspora, the invitation to complicate the equation, to turn up the temperature, to bring more stuff to the game in order to reveal all the more the qualities and complexity of Blackness. So walk with me for a bit while I tell you about my route to this conclusion. In about 2011, I premiered an evening-length performance piece titled The Spirits Break to Freedom with two collaborators, saxophonist, composer Bobby Zankel, and visual artist John Dowell. Through percussive dance, original songs and music, and original photographic images and 3-channel projected animations, we explored the internal lives of the enslaved Africans who served George and Martha Washington in the first White House, that colonial mansion in old Philadelphia that was known as the President's House. Shortly, we'll play an audio clip from the production. This is a song to Hercules, Washington's highly skilled Black and enslaved chef, who was sufficiently prized by the Washingtons for Hercules to be able to negotiate an arrangement where he could sell the scraps from the executive dining table and keep the proceeds for himself. In the tradition of the Black dandy, Hercules used some of those proceeds to have a fine waistcoat made for himself and to purchase an ornate cane and watch fob, all of which he wore as he strolled through old Philadelphia after he finished his kitchen duties. I imagine Hercules being better dressed than the president. I choreographed a dance in a bed of rock salt for tap dancer Khalil Munir, portraying Hercules. You can hear the crunch of the rock salt under the melody in this audio clip. Please play the audio clip, Ballad of Hercules. waiting for a sign, listening for the answer. Here's the crossroad, light the way, give me courage to obey, to run a course unknown, or eat my pride and stay. When I wrote and sang those lyrics, I wasn't thinking of Paul on the road to Damascus. I was thinking of Papa Legba, the Haitian Vodun Loa, the trickster, the linguist, the intermediary who stands at the crossroads. The dance in a trough of rock salt, which you could hear on the clip, evokes both the punishment of toiling in the salt mines that Washington leveled on Hercules due to suspicion that Hercules was planning to escape, which he eventually did, and to the salt of the Legba ritual bath used for purification and cleansing. That rather oblique reference to Vodun came out of my curiosity about what the enslaved Africans at the president's house might have known about the Haitian Revolution that was going on during the Washington presidency. I asked that question of a local historian who told me they knew everything. They were listening in as exiled planters from Haiti came to the president's house to petition President Washington for favors and for dispensation from the gradual emancipation law that was in effect in Pennsylvania. Oni Judge, who was Martha's body servant, Hercules, and other enslaved Africans were attuned to the conversations of Philadelphia's free blacks about the valiant freedom fight that Haitians were waging against the French army. In an extension of the spirit's break to freedom, I later made a piece that imagined that Giles, George Washington's enslaved stableman, was visited and mounted by a Vodun spirit. I danced the role of Giles, and a stunning dancer steeped in Afro-Caribbean tradition danced the role of the Vodun spirit, while a third performer beat an insistent Haitian rhythm on cowbells. In our dance, Giles was going about his stable chores when the spirit of the Loa came over him and rode him as if he were a horse. When the spirit departed, Giles regained his composure, not knowing what had happened to him, but knowing that he was changed. I knew that our dance was not as speculative as it might seem once I'd read an account of a French planter who fled Haiti and landed in Philadelphia with his family and 2 enslaved Haitians after 2 years crossing land and sea. They took up residence over a hat shop near 2nd and Market Streets, just a few blocks from the president's house. So to my mind, it was easy to imagine that the spirits of Yoruba were alive in Philadelphia in the 1790s, if not earlier. And it fit right into an emerging narrative when drummer, ethnomusicologist, and Yoruba practitioner Elizabeth Sayre told me that Philadelphia hadn't received the notice and credit it was due for nurturing Yoruba-rooted spirituality and culture, especially since the mid-1900s. People credit New York and Oyotunji Village in South Carolina, but according to Lois Fernandez, who started the Odunde Festival and others, Yoruba spirituality was taking root and gaining adherents in Philadelphia's African-American communities during the 1950s. And the accretion of presence and diversity of Yoruba practice, both cultural and spiritual, continues in Philadelphia to this day. By 2016, when Alex Shaw and Leela Aisha Jones and the Intercultural Journeys organization joined me to create Modupwe Ibaye, the Philadelphia Yoruba Performance Project, I was totally consumed with exploring Philadelphia's relationship with the various expressions of Yoruba, from Haiti, from Cuba, Brazil, Jamaica, Trinidad, Puerto Rico, and elsewhere in the Americas. In a Pew-funded project that lasted almost 2.5 years, we held story circles, visioning sessions, workshops, processionals and performances, panel discussions, lectures, and a massive media exhibition, all in pursuit of celebrating the communities that make Philadelphia an important, though under-acknowledged place of nurturance and transference of Yoruba-rooted philosophy, spirituality, and performative culture. I'd like to share with you the video introduction to our Media Archive exhibition, a 4-day event that allowed our audiences to immerse themselves in documentation we amassed during the 2 years of the project, as well as a feast of live events. Aiden Un is the filmmaker. The video clip from the introduction, please.
Understand it's all one, as we are all one. Every element in my body floats around in the universe to create every star. What's in my body created and circulating every blade of grass, every stone, every drop of water. My biggest prayer for the new people coming in to understand that and open their heart, open their soul, and feel it when you walk through the woods, when you stand by the river, when you watch the ocean. Just lifting your head up and looking at the sky and saying thank you to whatever name you want to assign to God. And understand all of this He created for me and everybody here on this planet. And we all are the same. We're made up of the same stuff.
What we don't understand is that this practice is a living religion, and it will adjust itself to whatever environment that it finds itself in.
Ekwa baba, ekwa bayunle, ekwa yaguna, ekwa watala.
Many of the older generation, they were doing this because it was a part of their orientation in terms of like being proud and being Black. It was like kind of like, okay, well, if I'm saying that I'm proud to be Black and I'm saying that I'm proud to be African and I'm saying that this matters to me, then the natural progression is that I'm going to also embrace some type of African-centered spiritual orientation.
Ibarak boko mo yuba omonde koniko si barak boko mo yuba. Oh la roye, ekwa baba. Wayegala me fa arembu wayegala me fa o ayaguna hekwa baba mi aquí a la dora mafere fun ocha.
Sometimes your curiosity doesn't get the best of you and you say, well, they told me I'm on this side of the room and I'm fine with that, and that's okay. But some people are like, I want to know what's going on in that room. I think I'm ready to find out what's happening in that room.
Kawo, Kawie, see, Waye waye lo mi o, waye gala me fa. Go go. Waye waye lo mi o, waye gala me fa. Orisha di de. Waye gala me fa. Egwa batala. Waye gala me batala.
Our first event in the Yoruba Project was a series of story circles at the Village of Arts and Humanities, formerly the Ile-Ife Black Humanitarian Center, founded by cultural activist Arthur Hall. In the late 1950s to 1980s, Arthur was a dynamic force in Philadelphia, using traditional African and Afro-Caribbean arts as a vehicle for transforming lives in the North Philadelphia community where the center is located. His doors were open to anyone, however troubled their history, anyone who wanted to learn to dance and drum and connect to their ancestry and work to activate purpose in their own lives and in the life of their community. Arthur was eclectic in his embrace of African traditions. He looked to Yoruba, Akan, to the Caribbean, to New Orleans, and other Africanist sources. His signature piece for the Yoruba Orisha Obatala, he said, came to him in a dream. He first performed it as a solo in 1958, and it became a centerpiece for productions he created for decades. In Arthur's interpretations of Obatala, the Orisha teaches his children the lessons of compassion, patience, and love. During story circles, when I heard the stories of former members of the dance company, Arthur came to represent for me what Omi Jones said in an article she wrote in the late 1990s, that the Orisha does the work that needs to be done wherever it lands. In the Yoruba Project, we continually asked ourselves and our Yoruba-rooted communities, the ones we engaged with, where are the artifacts of the work the Orishas have done here? And what is the work that needs to be done by the Orisha today in our communities? Another connective thread that wove through the Yoruba Project activities is the idea, prompted by the writings of Stuart Hall, Brent Hayes Edwards, Rachel Harding, Nadine George Graves, and others, that there is a Black take on the concept of diaspora, and that the Yoruba diaspora can be seen as a metaphor for a vision of diversity and inclusion that the world would well learn from. Rachel Harding attributes the endurance of Yoruba as a spiritual system and culture to the strength and coherence of its teachings and customs, and also to the pattern of Yoruba in intertwining with and infusing the local and indigenous beliefs and customs as it arrived in various places in the Americas. And so we have an array of syncretic religions: Santeria, Candomblé, Caboclo, Vodun, Spiritual Baptist, Shango, Obia, Rastafarianism, with Yoruba at its core. The Yoruba Project was grounded in the intention to both respect the distinctiveness and specificity of each local expression of Yoruba spirituality and culture, and also create spaces for discourse across the web of affiliations among local practitioners of Yoruba-rooted spiritual and cultural expressions. Philadelphia's diverse Yoruba-rooted communities embraced the chance to commune with one another in workshops that interwove the rhythms and dances of Yoruba land, Cuba, and Brazil, in a grand processional on the Parkway and performance at the Barnes Foundation that incorporated Yoruba-rooted performative culture from Haiti, Cuba, and Brazil, and especially the Media Archive exhibition, whose introduction you saw earlier. In last evening's salon, hosted by Jumatatu Poe, I was struck by the coexistence of a strong sense of affinity among the four participants, Juma, Zinzi, Muti, Hanata, from their different places in the Black diaspora, and of a sense of them traveling their own changing paths in their embodiment of Blackness. As Juma said, they were using choice to change themselves and thereby create possibilities for finding new planes and new meanings. It's this idea of diasporic connection in close alignment with personal agency to define and redefine ourselves that feels so hopeful and expansive. On the final day of the Media Archive exhibition, we hosted a community forum facilitated by Ariel Julia Brown on use of traditional Yoruba expression and iconography in contemporary art and popular culture. We used the work of visual artists Fahamu Peku, Beyonce's Lemonade, and other examples to tease out opinions on who is in a position to interpret or reinterpret Black traditions, and whether there are lines that should not be crossed when Black traditions and archives are utilized as a source of material for creative work or commercial productions. It became a lively conversation among an overflow audience who probably would have continued much longer if we hadn't had to move on with the day's program. When is reverence for traditional forms and practices a necessary protection against appropriation and misappropriation of cultural vessels for eons of Black history, endurance, and resilience? And when does reverence become a barrier to using tradition to shape and tell the stories that need to be told today and in the future? Those questions weren't resolved that December afternoon and will never be resolved, nor should they be. The best way for Blackness expressed as tradition and archive to remain vibrant in the quest for liberation is for there to be constant creative tension between permanence and an aliveness that fuels an incessant becoming. I foresee that BSR's Caribbean residencies will serve to enrich and heighten this necessary durational dialectic. I'm intrigued by the idea of Black aliveness. Just yesterday, this idea surfaced strongly for me in two contexts. It's implicated in Juma's question to his discussants last evening about how they would situate themselves in relation to the representations we carry as Black people. What it would mean to have a confrontation with those representations. And there was a book that arrived in my mail yesterday titled Black Aliveness or the Poetics of Being, authored by Kevin Quashie, which based on my preliminary perusal argues that the notion that Blackness comes into being through violence and trauma, metaphorically through Frederick Douglass's seeing his Aunt Esther being beaten by her master, is too limiting a basis for advancing Black humanity. In the introduction, Quashie recounts with what he describes as molecular rage, a catalog of recent Black deaths and could have been deaths at the hands of police, and says, by the time this paragraph is published, these names and incidents will be old news, replaced by another incalculable catalog of harm. And then he says, today there is no reconciling the facts of our lives, which seem tethered to death, and to the case for Black aliveness. Both have to be true at the same time. Quashie finds a font of Black aliveness in the poems and essays of Black women, like Audre Lorde, Toni Morrison, Jamaica Kincaid, Lucille Clifton. I would take Quashie's card and match it with the thought that Black aliveness also resides in the ecstasy of whining and mambo and a good bop and the taste and texture of soursop and ackee as raised up in a conference session led by Shanel Edwards earlier this week. So here we are, back at the intersection with this marvelous undertaking by Black Spatial Relics to create residencies for artists from the Caribbean countries. That generative act of creating space for more and different expressions of Blackness, to weave webs of affiliation and kinship across distinct and specific embodiments of diasporic culture. That visionary act of making space for study. Study in the sense of Fred Moten's invitation to talk and walk around with other people, working, dancing, suffering, some irreducible convergence of all three held under the name of speculative practice. That courageous act of calling on artists to define and redefine Blackness for themselves through, as Nadine George Graves says, an active process of diasporic spidering into the past, present, and future, across time, geography, and cultural distance. That evocative act of welcoming artists into the fold of the jazz aesthetic, where, as Omi teaches us, the precepts of presence, breath, listening, improvisation, simultaneous truth, innovation, collaboration, virtuosity, body-centeredness, and metamorphosis reside. That insistent act of making space for artists to show up prepared to be their whole self. That rambunctious and audacious act of being in the heat, the funk, the sweat of engaging passionately and lovingly with difference, otherness, and radical juxtaposition. I leave you by returning to Arthur Hall, who I think created spaces that embodied most, if not all, the qualities that I trust this new initiative by Black Spatial Relics will exemplify. Here's Arthur as the Orisha Obatala doing the work that needed to be done. The video clip, please. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Germaine. I'm sitting here like notating, note-taking incessantly. Yes, thank you. That was so generous and so rich. And I will undoubtedly rewatch this, to study this. Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to start us off with a question, and I want to invite, yeah, as y'all are able to recover yourselves, I want you to gather your questions and comments and contribute them in the chat or live on Facebook. Yeah, Germaine, I want to come back to this question, this lifting of the constant creative tension between aliveness and Black aliveness and permanence. And I want, because I think like the conversation last night as you were getting to was like calling in and breathing through and with this tension, you know, that like kind of arises sometimes like in unexpected moments, in the most beautiful of ways. And I wonder, yeah, I wonder if you might continue to share story with us about moments of encountering or moments when that tension encounters you between Black aliveness and permanence. And perhaps also I wonder about strategies or even like movement, like ways of being in movement with, ways of ways of being in movement with and flow with that tension that have shown up in creative process for you. Yeah.
That's a huge question. Well, I mean, we've all experienced just, you know, the distress of not just this past year, but, you know, just the accumulation, the pileup, the traffic jam of all these heart-wrenching incidents, and that is Black life, and we have to acknowledge that. But as I've been reading more about, you know, I guess what's being called Afro-pessimism, yeah, I feel like I need some source of hopefulness, not to erase what is obviously the fact, but supply us with the sense of hope that allows us to persist and find strategies. And that's why I was so delighted to see Kwashi's new book. You know, where he certainly acknowledges the pain, as he says, he feels a molecular rage at all these deaths. But at the same time, he feels that there must be a balancing of that rage with a source of Blackness that is not dependent on trauma, that is not dependent on death. And for him, he finds that in the power of Audre Lorde, of Toni Morrison, of Jamaica Kincaid, of Lucille Clifton, you know, of those Black women feminist voices. But, you know, but there are other sources, obviously, as I said, Mambo and the bop and, all those things that, keep us, that keep us alive, keep us lively. And it's the, it's the power, the inherent power of that Black expression, not purely that expression in relationship or in contrast to death and trauma. That is this generative space that I think we need to hold on to.
Thank you for that. Y'all better come with these questions because I start asking questions for myself and I hope that they bless y'all. I want to lift Omi's comment in the comments here on Zoom. And she says, yes, that Black folk wake up each day is evidence that we exist beyond or alongside objection. Yes, that's right. And I guess to like being with embodied experience and life. And I love that you rooted us in this work with Hercules. I wanted to just because for myself and for some people who I know are on this call, I'm curious about just between reading your bio and experiencing your talk. I'm wanting to experience more from you, more story from you in general, but about um, how you have, yeah, as a Black woman, carved, built, choreographed this life, this body of work for yourself um, that seems to be deeply, so deeply rooted um, in your calling and your attraction. Um, yeah, I want to hear more about all of that. I want to hear more about um, yeah, how you have been deep in your choicefulness as an artist in Philadelphia. And yeah, and over really over the last 25 years. Yeah.
Well, I can't say that I was totally intentional about that. I mean, I really believe in not knowing, in the power of not knowing. That, you know, that's not ignorance. That, you know, that requires a sense of trust, a kind of virtuosity, a kind of patience, um, a sense of self. And so I think some of the choices that I've made, I didn't make the choice until I was well into the mire. As my mother used to say, you done on and jumped off the cliff again. But, you know, I'll give you an example. You know, I didn't start tap dancing until I was in, you know, sort of close to my mid-30s. And, you know, 10 years into a law career. And, you know, I don't know what made me wake up one morning with the notion that I wanted to tap dance. But the entry into that space and the people that I encountered there were just, you know, critical to my life. You know, both as examples of Black aliveness and Black endurance. And, you know, I don't know that I would be an artist today were it not my experience with LaVaughn Robinson, who was my dance partner and mentor and teacher for 25 years, or Baby Edwards, or Libby Spencer, or Hortense Allen, or Dee McHarris, or Eleanor Fambro, who were the veteran Black women tap dancers in Philadelphia, who were getting no recognition at the so-called renaissance of tap dance during the 1980s. You know, black men were being raised up and given opportunities, but it was like the Black women didn't exist. And it was my opportunity to sit with them and hear their stories and offer them a platform to relive the memories of those days when they were defying conventions. I mean, Hortense Allen was from the Midwest, and she had to lie about her age to be able to dance in a chorus line because she was, you know, she was too young. And that took her to becoming head of the chorus line for Louis Jordan. And it was there that she learned to, she was not just a dancer, she was a producer, she was a costumer, because it was necessary to do that. You know, that was a time when the costume houses wouldn't rent to Black companies, or if they'd rent you something, it was so nasty and disreputable that you wouldn't want to put it on your skin. And it was a result of that Hortense trained herself to make fabulous costumes, some of which we used in the review that we put on in 1994. But it was examples like that were just so inspiring to me, and allowed me to feel so grateful to help those women tell their story, tell their stories to, you know, even to their family. You know, a lot of their family didn't know what extraordinary performers they were. You know, whether or not they thought they were in a resistance movement, I don't know, but they were. You know, they were defying the expectations. And it was my, you know, engagement, my encounter with those folks that I think has sort of fueled my arts career.
That's beautiful. I'm reminded of Ebony's keynote earlier this week and her calling in being with deep surrender as the access to the freedom through line, you know, and that makes me think about, yeah, that also just makes me think of like, yeah, the dramaturgy of need, especially like for Black women, like how do you come to innovation, and as Mariam is lifting your openness to discovery by way of the call, by way of what feels like a vacancy that you need to be with. Deb Thomas asks a question. She says, I would be interested in hearing Germaine talk about how she understands her artistic practice and her legal practice and her spiritual practice to be linked, and the ways each may inform the other.
That's interesting. I mean, a lot of people say to me, "Oh, you know, you made a you made a dramatic turn from law to arts." And I mean, there was certainly a period of time when I was doing both, when I was maintaining an active law practice and trying to maintain an active arts practice. But you know, I really think they're related. I think it took a while for me to realize that. But I think that I think I was an effective lawyer because I understood the power of narrative. It was, what I enjoyed about being a lawyer, especially a trial lawyer, is finding the facts within, this plethora of stuff, that could tell a true story. It's not the story, but a true story that represents the experience and the need for justice of my clients. And I think going the other way, my sense of process as a lawyer has fed my arts career, has sort of helped me to sort of figure out, well, that's for another production. I can use this one now. This one speaks to what my aim is here. And with regard to spirituality, I guess I was saying the other day, I haven't been in a church in a long time except for a funeral. I find a lot of spirituality in vocal improvisation. This notion of, I don't call it surrender, I call it yielding. Yielding to what the song asks for. understanding the power of silence, practicing the art of deep listening. There's a space there of spirituality that I think is just so profound, and finding a community of vocal improvisers about 12 years ago has made an enormous contribution to my life, not only to my artistic life, but in how I think about relationality and engagement.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about, the power of vocal improvisation. Yeah. Thank you for that. Omi lifts in the chat. She says, Germaine, I am interested in how Black people can release the residue of anti-Blackness we may carry from our immersion in white supremacy so that our liberation won't be tainted by it. I think your list of what constitutes aliveness is a way to mute, possibly remove that residue. What do you think?
I'm not sure it mutes or erases that residue. I think that's with us. That's in our bones. That's in our muscles. The question is, what we can do to kind of, to move those muscles, to make those muscles respond to our own will. I don't think we can deny what's there, but we can find ways to engage with what's there in a way that embodies hope, embodies innovation. This question about, the tension between tradition and evolution, that's one of those things. How do we protect that? Because, those traditions, the ring shout is a consequence of being denied the opportunity to fully express our artistic selves. So we don't want to let that go, and we don't want it to be sullied or diminished. At the same time, we want to be free to utilize that energy, that knowledge, that wisdom, that body, that sense memory in a way that takes us forward, that takes us into the future, into a future that we can't yet see.
Yes, that is so, feels like such another way of being with, like the tension with abjection and the living every day. Yeah, I wrote that you said that white supremacy is in our muscles, but it's our job to move those muscles to conform to our own will. Yeah. So rich. I'm wondering, and this question isn't quite formed, but I am wondering, I do have a question that is coming in my body somehow about you and travel. I remember in the midst of a workshop with the Yoruba Project, you you and I had a conversation on the side, and you were talking about being from Georgia and moving up to North Philly and your depth of commitment to North Philadelphia. And I wonder about like how you think about that migration and your work and how that informs your work. I wonder, um, I wonder about other travel throughout the diaspora um, over the years. Um, Yeah, and moments, I think it was Zenzi last night who lifted these moments of ricochet where you're elsewhere and you have to reconfigure like for yourself, what is your Blackness? What is your like what is this thing you were living through or moving through? Because you find yourself elsewhere, like in a way that so deeply challenges you and then roots you back to yourself. Yeah, I wanna hear about the role of travel in your work and life.
Well, I don't consider myself particularly well traveled. I mean, actually, my parents came from Georgia. I was born and raised in Philadelphia, but my parents, my father was from Atlanta. My mother was from the cosmopolitan area of Hartwell, Georgia. um, so my household had a lot of those, sort of resonances, not only in the food, but in the customs. My my father came to Philadelphia when he was in his teens. Both his parents died when he was young, and his oldest brother brought him and his other siblings to Philadelphia. And so um, so by the time I was born, my father was, I think, a true Philadelphian, but my mother was the one who really retained a lot of those resonances. Um, you know, I I I had a 2-month residency in Brazil in the Sacatar Institute um, off of Salvador, and the way Hanata talked about Brazil last night, and talked about sort of diaspora within the diaspora of Brazil, and I really felt the sense of that, and the sense of this different relationship to color in Brazil. I recall being with one of the artists who was part of the residency period that I was in, was from Mozambique, and he was very dark skinned. And when we go into town, we went to town one day, and a guy said to him, something, he called out to this artist from Mozambique, and I said, "What does that mean?" He said, "Well, he's kind of saying, man, you are super black." And but that was, it was descriptive. It was, it wasn't pejorative in any way, and it wasn't taken that way. It was merely descriptive. And I thought about how that would be taken if that were said, on a Philadelphia street. So so that time in Brazil was sort of really rich in kind of sort of intersecting with these different expressions of Blackness. I spent as much time as I could in Candomblé and Caboclo ceremonies, as many as I could get myself into, and it was just that way with spirituality, the sense of theatricality was, something I'd never experienced, although having gone to evangelical and, sort of ecstatic spiritual settings here. But, but there was, encounter with, true trance. And, I had the opportunity to go to the ceremony for the preparation of ceremonial animals. I wasn't allowed into the actual slaughter of the animals, but I was able to experience the ritual before it and after it. And I'll never forget seeing one of the drummers go into that ritual space, and then when he emerged, you could see that he was changed, and you could see this pattern of re-entry as he left that spiritual place and resumed his role as the ceremonial drummer. It's those experiences that give me a sense of the breadth of a Black experience.
I have one question that feels like a beautiful question to end on from Facebook. What are your dreams for that future we can yet see? What is dance there? What is spirit in that place? Is the scale practice of it different from now?
I think it's certainly different from now, but it's not opposed to now. I mean, I feel hopeful I feel so hopeful in what I heard from artists this week. The level of reflection, the level of risk taking that people are engaged in, the real desire to find structures that allow people to be their true selves. That's what I envision, the intersections, the interdisciplinary engagement of practice, I'd love a time when it's just art, that it's not dance and it's not filmmaking and it's not, it's not vocalizing and it's, it just is. And so that people don't feel that they have to make these, these hard choices about how they exercise, how they explore their artistic selves. I mean, that's what I envision, and I think it's real. I mean, I think it's it's tasteable, it's touchable, and you see people headed in that direction now.
Thank you so much, Germaine. I want to invite us to show our gratitude and love however you are able, whether it's in the comments or with yourself in whatever rooms you find yourself in. And I trust spirit that will travel to you, that you will feel the love that we feel reflected from your sharing. Beautiful. I think that is a perfect invitation into our closing. Malkia, I believe, is here to offer us a closeout. And thank you again, Germaine. And we will move from there into a closing libation. from Viktor's sharing. Again, thank you all for your attendance this week. I want to thank every artist and cultural worker who presented, who shared of themselves, of their spirit, of their tradition. Yeah, and until we have more space to gather next time. Thank y'all.
Hey, everybody. I'm not Malkia. I am trying to find her, but I just wanted to offer some closing words. My name is Joe Talbert Jr., and I have been acting as this year's convening producer. And I just want to say thank you all for taking this journey with us, because we know that these times are hard, but it is convenings like these with the amazing artists and keynote speakers that give us that little bit of hope. And yeah, we are just thankful for your support of Black Spatial Relics, and we hope that you continue to do so. And so I am now going to try and find where Malkia is and get their camera turned on so that Malkia, who is this year's acting associate producer, can also have some words. Oh no, I am not sure what is happening. Malkia, can you let me know where you are?
Jumatatu Poe,
If
myth.
they go out of space, they will leave you alive. But if they stay here,
I do not come to you as reality. I come to you as myth. Because that's what black people are. Myth.
When we was children, we really believed you could work the good out of evil. We believe in the newsprint on the wall, your tree of glass jars and bottles, the rice you carry in your pockets. We believe in the frizzle-head chicken, the coins, the roots, and the flowers. We believe they will protect us. And wherever lead in, we honor love. I ain't been scared of nothing. And no one. Because I knew my great-grandmother have it all in her pocket. Or could walk it up.
Never forget who we is and how far we done come.
I believe here. I don't have no other choice.
Eli, there's a time, a recollection, something somebody remembers. We carry these memories inside of we. Do you believe that those hundreds of Africans from here on this other side will forget everything they once knew? We don't know where the recollection comes from. Sometimes we dream of, but we carry these memories inside of we.
Now the iron was back, but the face, softened by hair, made him trust her enough to step inside her door, smack into a pool of pulsing red light. She was right. Who was that? Walking through it a wave of grief so deep and soft. Seemed a long way to the long sight, surrounded by
We
Hello.
were not able to fix
This is
the
Malkia.
video.
Sorry.
Oh, I was just letting them know that we weren't able to fix the video, but we did get audio. And now you will hear some closing words from our associate producer, Malkia Okech.
Yes. Hello, my name is Malkia. My name is Malkia Okech, and I am an associate producer at Black Spatial Relics. Throughout the convening, I've been mostly behind the scenes managing social media and stuff like that. This convening has been rejuvenating, refreshing, and activating. I commend all of the speakers, presenters, practitioners, facilitators, and artists for pushing the boundaries of how we can be in community remotely through Zoom. Through song, dance, archive, investigation, movement, experience, building, breath, through lines, dreaming, improvising, and more. Through visual patchworks of home, place, might I add places around the world, family, and any assortment of background. This week has truly been exemplary of what makes Black Spatial Relics. Black Spatial Relics. Thank you to everyone who made our convening possible, and thank you to those who have joined us, bearing any technical twists and turns. Thank you to the creators who brought pieces of themselves to us. It has been an honor to bear witness to these sharings and offerings. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I look forward to what Black Spatial Relics has in store next. Thank you.